Everyone, and welcome. I want to issue a very warm welcome to all the members of the UTSA community who are here in person, as well as a warm welcome to everyone zooming in from across our 5 campuses in the city. And let me just begin by thanking the team here at the Buena Vista Theater. They have been so lovely. It's a beautiful venue, and thank you for taking such good care of us. My name is Lisa Jasinski, and since May, I've served as the Senior Director of Strategic Initiatives in the Office of the President. And in my role, I have the great fortune of working with President Eighmy and other campus leaders to help shepherd and refine UTSA's vision for the future, what we call our strategic plan. So today we're here to learn a little bit more about that plan and have an interactive conversation with President Eighmy about what the future of UTSA might look like. But before we get to our conversation, I also want to let you know that earlier today we launched some content updates to the University Strategic Plan website. You can go there right now. Maybe not right now, maybe in 59 minutes, but the website is www.utsa.edu/strategicplan. And with some technical assistance, I just want to show you a couple things about this website that you'll look at in 58 minutes. Okay. Excellent. So if you've been to the site before, you'll see that the structure is really familiar, but what's new is the content. So what we've done is we've told you a little bit about all of our strategic destinations, but we've added an update about, for each of the more than 50 strategic initiatives that UTSA has started in the last 50 years, we tell you exactly what the goals are for each, and we let you know what progress we've made, so you can see what we finished and then what we're still working on. It's a great way to kind of get up to speed on everything that's happened in the last 5 years. We also wanted to give you some updates. So we're 5 years in, right? 10-year plan, 5 years in, 5 years to go. We've cleaned up some things to give you a midpoint progress report, so it's a much more kind of a streamlined version of metrics, very easy to read, user-friendly. You can see exactly where we stand. We also wanted to give you some new content. So we've added a page about frequently asked questions. It'll help you just better understand what a strategic plan is and why it's so important. And lastly, there's a whole bunch of information about the refresh process. We'll talk a little bit about that today, but again, I encourage you to go to www.utsa.edu/strategicplan just to see more about that anytime in the future. So before we kind of jump into the meat, I thought I would just talk a little bit about the format for today. So we've really tried to frame this as a fireside chat. It's a conversation with President Eighmy to talk a little bit about what we've accomplished in the last 5 years, what you can expect from this year, and then what you can expect from the last 5 years of the strategic plan. I have a few questions to get us started, but this is really designed to be interactive. So in just a few minutes, we'll launch a QR code. Should be able to see it behind me in just a second. Those of you that are here in person, you can take a photo of the QR code. You can submit your questions in real time. Those of you that are watching virtually, you can also, I think the QR code is right on the YouTube page, so you can submit a question right through the form. I also want to say that a few folks have submitted questions in advance, so we've already added those to the lineup for today. It's possible we won't have time for everything, but we will cover just as many as we can. And looking forward to this really great interactive conversation. So while he hardly needs an introduction, I'm happy to welcome today President Eighmy, who's UTSA's 6th president, and he's in his 6th year. And really, you've had the great distinction of leading UTSA through some unprecedented moments of growth and transformation. So welcome, President Eighmy, and thank you for being here today.
Thank you, Lisa.
So to get us started, why don't you tell us what a strategic plan is, and then why we're doing a 5-year refresh?
Yeah. You know, this is a moment in time to look to the future and to assess, to celebrate, to reaffirm. And it's, as I'll explain in a minute, it's something that all institutions have to do. And I'll talk about that process, but I want to stop the conversation for a second and just share that many of us have heavy hearts today because we lost someone who's very near and dear as a friend and colleague and a very, very important person here at UTSA. And Barry McKinney died yesterday, and we're all struggling with that a little bit. So even though we're here to have a very forward and positive, focused conversation, I know there are many heavy hearts in the room. So
Thank you for saying that.
Having been around the block a few times in higher ed, I've seen strategic plans at institutions that get developed and sit on a shelf and gather dust. In other places, they become very important guides or maps for the future of the institution. And it won't surprise you to know that here in Texas with the UT System Board of Regents, it's a very honored process to have a strategic plan for the institution. It's part and parcel of what you do and how you plan for the future and how you make sure the future happens. And so when I got here in 2017, many of you are new, but some of you were here back then. I was tasked by the Board of Regents and UT System to work with my colleagues, all of you, to develop a strategic plan for UTSA. And that commenced, the planning for it began in 2017, and it kind of went live in 2018. And we intentionally chose a 10-year strategic plan for the institution. And what's special about it is that a 10-year period allows you to look over the horizon and think about the future and plan for the future if you can. At the same time, accommodate the annual review process that happens for the institution. So we had a plan that we launched. It has 3 destinations around student success, becoming a great public research university, and focusing on strategic growth and innovative excellence. So those 3 destinations have been very, very good waypoints or North Stars for us as an institution. But typically in a 10-year strategic plan, you would stop at year 5 and reassess if it's working or not, and to allow you to reaffirm, to tweak the system a little bit if you want to. And typically what happens is that UT System and the board ask for an update of a 10-year strategic plan at year 5. So we're in the process of doing that right now. And we'll be actually presenting our refreshed strategic plan to UT System and the board next fall, so about a year from now. So we have about a year's worth of work to do in this. And what's special is that this is a very community engaged process, very transparent process. And we are building this to really take advantage of some of the hybrid technologies that we've learned and acquired post-pandemic to be able to take our story out about the strategic plan and the refresh process across the institution. So actually, I'm grateful that you're all here, sitting here. Many of you are members of the Strategic Plan Refresh Steering Committee. So you're here because you're going to be inheriting this whole process and working with Provost Espy to take this forward. Our steering committee is made up of our University Leadership Council, plus representatives from our shared governance organizations, our Faculty Senate, Staff Senate, Chairs Council, and SGA. And it also involves a few other individuals that are deeply involved in where our institution is going, about how we're accredited and how we pay attention to the data that we generate about ourselves. So it's a wonderful group. Our University Leadership Council, which is really the backbone of this steering committee, is where we take all of our big issues to talk about as an institution and to work on and strategize. So this is a perfect place to have the strategic plan refresh land, and that process will be going forward. So in some ways, it's smart of us to do the refresh. Now is a good point, especially coming out of a pandemic, to think about the future and all the things that are happening as we go forward, and take what we've learned and apply it and tweak our system going forward. But part of it is also a requirement from UT System to report in on where we're at year 5 and how does the next 5 years look. And we're also going to have to do, unlike when we launched our strategic plan, we're also going to have to do a business pro forma around how we're going to match resource allocation to our strategic initiatives that are helping us drive the institution to where we want to go. So that's a new wrinkle that was put in place a year ago. If you go look at the resource, is it called the resource site on the webpage? Where are we putting all the resource documents?
So, yeah, we can put that right under the strategic plan refresh page.
Okay, so all those, we're going to be making available all the resources that have helped guide our process and plan for the refresh, and it will include the other institutions within UT system, their presentations to the Board of Regents, so you can see what other institutions are doing. It's actually, it won't surprise you, we each have our own unique process, and they don't all look exactly alike, but the premise is common to all. So
that's great. Well, before we look to the future, maybe we can think about the past a little bit. So as you think about the last 5 years, what are some of the highlights from the strategic plan, and what are some things that we can celebrate?
You know, it feels like 5 years ago was a long time ago, and it also feels like it was just yesterday. In the last 5 years, a lot of things have happened, and not the least of which is a pandemic, a global pandemic that is still here to some degree. And the fact that we, as an institution, were able to navigate that very complex situation is a tribute to all of you and to our resilience as an institution and as a big family. And so, in some ways, so many things have happened that are worth celebrating too. Managing the pandemic, as painful as it was. I know some of you have probably lost family members and loved ones because of the pandemic, or were impacted financially by all the hardship imposed by the pandemic. I know many of our students really struggled about learning online, and we're still working through that process. I would also say this, that the things that we learned going through the pandemic that were good about us as an institution, about remote work, about hybrid learning, these are the things that we can bring forward into the future and use as foundational components of where we're going as we refresh our strategic plan. So even out of a very painful process like managing and navigating a horrific pandemic, there were things that came out of it that we can learn from and use to our advantage as an institution. So, but I mean, go back and think about it. Back in 2017, much happened. We were really focused on getting Carnegie R1. We were really focused on improving our student success measures dramatically. There's a fact that Provost Espy is going to have to help me with. She's sitting right here in the audience. But what's really remarkable is we've built on the foundation of all this effort that has been in place here. And we've grown from that foundation. So we stand on the shoulder of giants, as the phrase goes, because so much work had happened here prior to my arrival or my leadership team's arrival. And so we had a lot to work with, and we had a lot of momentum. And so we're very fortunate that we had all of that in place. But the statistic that I love to tell everyone is that about 10 years ago, the average time to graduation for an undergraduate here at UTSA was 5.4 years. And we've now dropped that down to 4.3 years. Thank you, everybody, for helping me. I'm getting all these good hand signals. And so that is profound when you think about the impact that it has on students in borrowing and debt upon graduation, and their opportunity to get into the workforce sooner. And it's one of those measures that's really hard to change and improve. And I would say that we've done this better than any institution in the United States. I have reason to believe that statement is actually true. And so we're very, very proud of those kinds of things that have taken place. And obviously, we have much to be happy about in terms of capital projects, in terms of what we've been doing around how our students engage on campus and what it's like from a student life and well-being perspective. Those are all really, really positive things. We can take great delight in our accomplishments on the athletic field if you want. We can take great delight in the pride that our community has for us as an institution. We are in a very enviable situation here in San Antonio. Our city loves us, and we love our city, and we are really embodying this notion that an education is the great equalizer. We're all born with the same potential, but not given the same opportunity, and UTSA in particular provides an education that transforms each and every student's life. And that is such a powerful notion that who wouldn't want us to be a major research university and educational institution in this 7th biggest city in the United States. So we have a wonderful mission and purpose, and all of the last 5 years and all of the work that preceded that has laid the groundwork for our momentum and our trajectory going forward. So I would actually say our strategic plan has been working pretty darn well, and that this is not a complete redo, it's a refresh, and it's gonna involve some tweaking and calibrating and maybe some new areas of emphasis, as I'll explain. And so we're in a good spot right now, as much as the last 3 years has been challenging from a pandemic perspective. There's still much that we have to work with going forward. So I would say we look back on what's transpired, and there's so much to be proud of, and it's the work of all of you and our colleagues who are watching online and all of our community, our Roadrunner community, that allows us to have such a positive, relatively positive focus going forward.
Great. So as we start to maybe just take stock of the landscape, how has the higher ed landscape changed on a national basis in the last 5 years since the strategic plan was developed?
In some ways, the pandemic accelerated our thinking. Provost Espy and her colleagues worked during the pandemic on tactical teams that started to think about the future, knowing what would happen when we came out of the pandemic. So what would the new form of pedagogy look like? What would remote work look like? What would student life experience on campus look like? What would the demand for housing on campus versus off campus look like? What would we be doing around recruiting faculty and staff to come to UTSA post-pandemic? So we used the pandemic as an opportunity to start to think about the future, knowing we were going to do a refresh on our strategic plan. And I would say that much of where our focus will be going forward is going to be driven by opportunities to refine our 3 destinations and to really reaffirm that they're exactly what they need to be, or if they're not, how do we tweak them to steer us for the next 5 years. And amongst all of that is this issue that the world doesn't care about the pandemic in this way. Forcing functions are coming down the pike left and right about higher education in the United States. They were on the horizon before the pandemic. They didn't slow down during the pandemic. In some ways, the pandemic exacerbated some of these forcing functions. So it won't surprise you to know that there's, in some quarters, even here in Texas, but nationally, there's questioning now about the value of a 4-year degree. Is it worth it to accrue the amount of debt that an average student graduates from a public institution relative to their opportunities to work, their opportunities to have a career, their opportunities to raise a family, do whatever they're going to do? The fact that 10 years ago, no one was asking this question, and now this is a pretty common discussion point in Congress, in Washington, D.C., in state capitals, just tells you that the value proposition around a higher ed degree, especially a public higher ed degree, is being questioned. We are facing a demographic cliff over the next 10 to 20 years, and it's situationally interesting for us because parts of the United States, most of the United States, are going to see a decline in college-age kiddos coming forward because birth rates have been declining in those parts of the United States. And so institutions that are dependent on students in their area to go to their institution are not going to be as available, and the competition for the students that are there is going to be increasing dramatically. And if you look demographically at the United States and what it's going to be doing over the next 20, 30 years, Texas's population is going to grow dramatically, and one of the places in the United States where there is not going to be a real impact from this demographic cliff is South Texas, including San Antonio. So we're sitting in a part of the United States where demographically there will not be a downturn from prior birth rates and college-age kids that are ready to go to college. So in some ways we're sitting in a good situation, but it's going to become increasingly competitive for the students that are here. I use this anecdote loosely. 10, 15 years ago, 80 or so colleges and universities would recruit students here in San Antonio. Now it's over 200. So the world has changed from a demographic perspective. It's changed from a value proposition perspective. The way we think about work has changed. So if you're about to graduate and go off into the workplace, you're not going to work at an institution for 10 or 15 years. On average, you're going to work at an institution for 4 or 5 years. That dynamic has changed dramatically. The way that you learn in college has changed dramatically, and that was accelerated by the pandemic. This concept of being at a residential university for 4.0 years and living on campus the whole time and not having an experiential learning opportunity, that whole rubric has gone out the window. So concepts of experiential learning, of hybrid learning, of living on campus for a little bit, then living off campus for a little bit, and finishing in 4.5 years instead of 4 years. Those are the kinds of things that kiddos are thinking about these days. So that's another huge paradigm shift in this higher ed landscape. And there are others that are out there. How we finance higher ed has been challenged significantly with many states supporting higher ed to a lesser degree. Fortunately, here in Texas still is very, very supportive financially of public higher education, and it's a great place to practice higher education. You can go to other states where the situation is rather dismal, and we don't have that situation here in Texas. So a lot of forcing functions out there are affecting the workplace, the future of work, the future of higher education, demographic trends for college-going kids. All of these things are things that we have to pay attention to as we think about our refresh. And some of them we were already thinking about. Some of them have been accelerated by all sorts of things, especially the pandemic. So we were actually prepared for this moment. It's here maybe a little bit faster than some of us would have wanted, but it is what it is. And every other institution is thinking about these things too. And if we can do this well and think about it appropriately and be smart about it, we'll be in good shape as we go forward. I have optimism about a lot of this. So
that's great. So as we think about some of those trends, help us understand some other trends. So what are prospective students? So as we think about Gen Z students, as we think about students who are contemplating college in the next 2, 5, or 10 years, what are some of the things that are top of mind for them?
Yeah, it's interesting. There are a bunch of surveys that we look at, and there are a lot of surveys out there, but we pay attention to many of them, the really good ones, and there are interesting things that are happening globally and nationally. Employers are really interested now in hiring kiddos that can work in a group, that can communicate, that can write, that can bring empathy to the workplace, that are globally competent, that are socially aware about cultural issues. They're very interested in those kinds of things. Our students that are going to be coming here in 2 or 3 years are very interested in well-being and mental health provision, care and provision of mental health services, of an inclusive and diverse campus, of a learning environment that allows them to have a job when they graduate with as little debt as possible, and that they want a blend of an on-campus experience with flexibility in their learning trajectory. It could involve study abroad. It could involve experiential learning, taking time away from being in the classroom. So these are huge paradigm shifts, not only on the employer side, but on the prospective student side that, again, require us to pay close attention to these things as we think about a refresh.
Great, so I want to remind everyone that this is an interactive conversation. So we're starting to get some real-time questions, and I'm going to ask you one of those in just a second, President Eimy. But it sounds like you have real cause to be optimistic for the future, but based on where we are here in San Antonio, based on the student populations we serve. You talked a little bit about what it's like to be an institution in Texas right now. Say a little bit more about that.
I'm an optimist by nature, glad to be. What's interesting, higher ed, public higher ed especially, is now being reevaluated by rubrics that were not even considered 5 or 10 years ago. So it's happening here in Texas with higher education, public higher education. It's happening with UT Systems evaluation of us as an institution, but it's also happening at the national scale, and it has to do with how you prepare young people to go out in the world and to have the opportunity to work and to have a career and a life with meaning. And they have different titles, the new rubrics that are being applied to public higher education institutions. Typically it's called return on investment, which is not so helpful a descriptor, but the others are social mobility index provision, so measuring an institution around their social mobility impact, or economic impact, economic opportunity impact. And what it really does is it looks at your data of your students that have graduated and where did they land in their first jobs, what were they earning, how does that compare to if they had just finished school at the high school level and didn't go to a 2 or 4 year program. What's their average debt load? What was the salary impact on their ability to pay off their debt within a certain time frame? What are the certain measures that you can assess an individual about their happiness, about their career selection or their educational opportunity they had at that institution? So there are all these measurements that are happening now where we, UTSA, we do really, really well in these measures. In fact, we outperform almost all institutions. We're in the top tier for these kinds of things. Many of our colleagues here in Texas are also the same. But if I'm a private institution in the Northeast, I'm a little worried about the fact that a place like UTSA is performing so well in this concept of this notion that we are defined by who we admit and not who we exclude, right? That we are defined by the impact that our students have going out into the world and having a meaningful life and one that contributes to society and has benefited the individual. So the fact that we do well in these measures bodes well for us. The Texas economy is another area that traditionally, these have been challenging times for sure. We have had very inflationary periods here recently around the war in Ukraine and supply chain disruption because of the pandemic, and that's been deeply impactful. But truth of the matter is Texas is a much stronger economy than almost any other state in the United States, and we as a state tend to go into recessions late and come out early with as perhaps a lesser impact to the state economy. And so the fact that our economy is strong going into the next legislative session is a very positive thing. So for those reasons, the way we are performing around educational opportunity, the fact that we're in a state and in a system that supports higher ed to the degree that it does, and the fact that we are pivoting to prepare for the future in the manner that we are, all of those give me cause to be very optimistic about how we're going to wend our way forward and continue our positive trajectory.
Great. We've had a couple questions that have come in about specific initiatives that came up as strategic initiatives. So I want to ask you 2 of those. The first is all about experiential learning, right? This is the Classroom to Career Initiative. Since this is such a big intrinsic part of UTSA culture and it's such a draw for students, can you give us a preview of what that might look like in the next 5 years and beyond? Yeah,
I think that is one of the foundational components of a UTSA education. And for those of you that had the pleasure of working on this, our accreditation by our accrediting body, we had to submit a 10-year plan for quality enhancement about our academic enterprise, and its focus is on classroom to career. And we've elected to have this be one of the big differentiators for a UTSA undergraduate education. And the data is very rich around the impact that experiential learning has on an individual's academic trajectory and their learning outcomes. And the fact that we are making it such a institution-wide component of the learning experience is something that's unique to UTSA here in Texas, and it's actually relatively unique nationally, so it's something that differentiates us in a profound way. I think that we're going to continue to bring this forward in the next 5 years. In fact, we might even double down on the concept of how we describe this and what it means for learning outcomes and for the opportunity of tying our experiential learning efforts to this concept of economic mobility or social mobility or return on investment for an undergraduate education here. And it's all linked. If you can learn better and have more of a sense of fulfillment in experiential learning, and that's applied to your life skills development, and you may end up interning or working for an organization or a company that's during your 4.5 years with us, it may mean that you end up working for that institution after you graduate. So to marry together this concept of return on investment with this focus that we have as an institution around career engaged learning is just a powerful notion. And so our strategic plan refresh process, we'll talk about that. I mean, we are set with our 10-year program around our QEP, our quality enhancement plan, but it gives us an opportunity to double down on our emphasis or how we want to do this going forward, so it becomes such an important signature thing for having a Roadrunner education or a UTSA advantage, as we say. So, yeah.
Another question we've had, another initiative is about inclusive excellence, right? This was one of your presidential strategic initiatives, stood up a new division of the university. Can you talk a little bit about what are our goals and successes around recruiting and retaining talented both faculty, but also staff and academic leaders from all backgrounds?
Yeah, I think it's important to turn our attention to a couple of things. One is who we are as an institution, that we are a Hispanic serving, really Hispanic thriving institution, and our entire purpose when we were created as a university back in 1969 was to really serve our community. Our imperative, our moral imperative as an institution is deeply tied to what we do here in San Antonio around advancing educational opportunity and all the benefits that come from that. So in part and parcel, we breathe this notion of being inclusive and excellence around what we do. And our one of the really special things that's happened in the last few years is our work with Excellencia in education and our being designated a SEAL recipient for our purposeful intentionality around advancing Latino student success, Latinx student success. And so in some ways, inclusive excellence is exactly who we are. It's just a part of our core. And if you look at what young people are looking for when they go off to school, if you look at the surveys of kids who are 15, 16, 17, thinking about going to college in 2, 3, or 4 years, they want a diverse institution. They want an inclusive institution. They want something that we already have here at UTSA. So does this mean that we're perfect in our leadership and our exemplariness about this? No. We have work to do about advancing the diversity of our administrative staff, our institutional staff, our faculty. We have a very diverse student body, but we still have work to do in that space, and it's something that is something we actually measure about ourselves as we go forward, and how we are working hard to diversify our faculty population and our staff population. And we did, with great intentionality, stand up Dr. Anderson's division of inclusive excellence for that sole purpose of focusing our institution on that going forward. And so it may be during the refresh process that we elect to feature that even more than we do now in one of our destinations or as a cross-cutting theme for our institution. It may be that we have additional initiatives that we want to put on the table to focus on that going forward. So I want to let the strategic plan refresh process help guide that because that's such an inclusive participatory effort by the institution to figure our path forward, but that would be some of the things that could come out of the discussions that are going to be happening.
Yeah. So we've had a question about if the strategic plan is a moment to reevaluate some of our core values. So maybe you could just talk a little bit about what's in the tent. So what's on the table to talk about this year as an institution?
Yeah, and this sounds rather formulaic, but we obviously have to do a refresh of the strategic plan, and that could encompass adding a destination to the 3 destinations we already have. It could involve rethinking the language around one of the destinations. It could involve dramatically changing one of the destinations. It could involve a thematic cross-cut across all 3 destinations. Some of the things that came out of the campus climate survey that we're working on and we've had town halls with and extensive conversations across the institution, we could end up with some theme related to having UTSA be a great place to work as a unifying theme across the destinations. We could put specific initiatives in place within a destination that drive things that are important to us. So the destinations piece is going to probably be the biggest and most significant effort of the refresh process, making sure the destinations are right and maybe adding more value to the things that we work on about them. But we also have some other things we have to do. We have to look at our mission statement. We have to look at our core values. And we have to look at our peer institutions. We set up a group of 10 peer institutions back in 2017 or 2018. Some of them are not relevant to our trajectory now. So much has happened here at UTSA about our Carnegie R1 designation or our student success focus or our membership in the Alliance for Hispanic Serving Research Universities that we have a whole new peer group of institutions that are really wonderful student success enterprises and wonderful research universities at the same time. And we're just as wonderful as they are, but within that group, we may elect to have some of those institutions become aspirant peers or current peers for us. So we'll have to do a little bit of messing around with our peer institutions, because what we end up doing is benchmarking ourselves to their progress and their data about how they do student success or research or whatever. And UT System uses that peer list to evaluate us as well. So the world, as an aside, we have this strategic plan and it is going to be really embodied in a very transparent and available way on the website. But what I find that I haven't done a very good job of this is explaining that we have to affirm our strategic plan with system every year. I get evaluated by the affirmation of what we're doing each year relative to the strategic plan. I and the institution have 24 or so key performance indicators that, and this will be in the resource area of the webpage as well. We have key performance indicators that we get measured by every year by system and the Board of Regents. And so what we're trying to do in this refresh process is give each and every one of our Roadrunner community members an opportunity to see how they fit into this process and where we're going. They see their contributions directly or indirectly in our trajectory that's going upwards in such a beneficial way. But I also want folks to understand that this is an organic document. It can be refined slightly every year, but it is going to be another 5-year sort of map or North Star process to take us into the future. And so I want everybody to understand that. I want everybody to feel pride of ownership about it. I want everybody to be able to talk about our destinations and their role on each or all of the destinations. Some of you have direct connection to 20 of the KPIs. And if you're in athletics, it's hard to find, let's say, your connection to more than maybe one of the KPIs. But still, I'd like for everybody, whatever division they're in, to feel like they have a pure sense, a true sense how they contribute to where the institution is going.
Great. We've had a couple of questions ask a little bit about downtown expansion.
Yeah.
So I thought maybe just to, as a first question, and then I have a follow-up for you, what's the vision with downtown? There's a lot of things happening at UTSA. Take us up to speed on what the vision is.
Yeah. It's an interesting concept. I always say this, and I don't know that I made this up myself. I think I did, but when I Googled it later, I realized another president had said this as well. So I don't have pride of ownership, although I feel pride of ownership. But I always say this: great cities need great universities, and great universities need great cities. We have a great city, and we want to be a great university. And what's powerful about this is that if you go back to the return on investment concept or the economic mobility concept, we are impacting 6, 7, 8,000 lives every year, students who graduate and go out into the world to make it a better place. And our role in enabling that or fostering that or supporting that or nurturing that is just a really powerful thing. And it's interesting, this campus, our downtown campus, came into being in Ann, help me, what year was it? Say again?
96, 97.
Yeah, thank you. It was about 27, 28 years ago, 96, 97. Because of inequity in South Texas around higher education support. And the funding was to build this downtown campus here in the core of downtown was provided by UT System and the legislature to start to address the inequities that were present in South Texas about lack of resources for public higher ed institutions or the absence of public higher ed institutions in South Texas. So obviously UTSA was one of the more prominent South Texas institutions, but what they did to invest in, let's say, UT Rio Grande Valley was another example of a direct effort by MALDEF, the Mexican American Legal Defense and Education Fund, was to really drive equity attainment by putting resources into our community. And our community leaders decided that instead of putting more resources into the main campus, they wanted to invest here downtown to make this institution accessible to the community. And we believe in that. We believe in growing that. We believe in our role about preparing a future workforce and also our role in driving the economy of San Antonio, especially in the economic areas that matter to our community. So we're deeply involved with economic development efforts at the city, county, and state level here in San Antonio. And we're trying to match up the provision of young people coming out from UTSA to work in our community, to stay here in San Antonio, to have high-paying jobs here in San Antonio. We're working on that side of the equation with the same sort of effort to grow economic development opportunities for our economy here in San Antonio. So those are part and parcel, core values of us as an institution and what we do. And the downtown presence that we have can enable that. The downtown presence can support that, can increase our availability, can increase the opportunities that we have to grow the economy and grow workforce at the same time.
Yeah, and so this is the first part of the follow-up. So a different question asked about how we balance our downtown expansion with the fears of gentrification and a reality in many American cities.
Yeah, that has been a question that I've gotten a lot since I arrived. We've, over the last 5 years, have worked very, very closely with the west side of San Antonio and are establishing our community center in the west side, and our West Side Partnership Program are all wonderful examples of our efforts around engaging our community. And I think, this concept of gentrification has been happening in San Antonio, in the east side, in the south side, and in the west side for 20 or 30 years around real estate development efforts and directed at homeowners over time have been really, really amplified in the last 10 or 15 years. And I know that is a very, very difficult pressure on the community, especially around the concerns around supporting the important cultural features of our neighborhoods and what that means to the communities writ large. And so there's a balance there. How do you provide educational opportunity, and how do you ensure that the rich cultural environments of all of our neighborhoods in San Antonio are not affected by what we're doing as an institution and what the rest of our institutions here in the city are doing as well. So there are discussions that are happening at the city and county level about this, with elected officials about this. We're engaging community organizations about this, and we're working with civic leaders on these sorts of things. And we do have a number of things that we're very proud of about our work on the West Side around supporting title transfer in families, because that has been a huge problem for losing title to properties so that the property doesn't stay with the family over a multi-generational period. We've also been working on research projects around supporting families around navigating the historical designation aspect of owning a home, and because that's been a huge impediment to home ownership and transmission of title and property to subsequent generations in a family. So there are a lot of things that we're engaging the community about and have active involvement with, and we're doing this increasingly on the east side as well, and we know that we need to do this across our community, but it's a work in progress.
Yeah. So the other question about this, one thing that has changed, this is part of the national landscape, campuses have increasingly had to think a little bit harder about policing and security. And as you think about going into the strategic plan refresh, how do you sort of reimagine that as something that's different than 2017?
Yeah, I'm very proud of this, and I'd like to give one of my colleagues, Veronica Salazar, our Senior Vice President for Business Affairs, a huge shout out about this, because she's been working with Stephanie Schoenborn, our police chief, about this. We intentionally wanted to pivot our community focus around how our PD operates into something that we weren't doing before, in my mind. We weren't engaging the community. We weren't partnering with the community around shared approaches to well-being and well-being services and support of other parts of the enterprise with our police force and its activities in the community, principally around the provision of well-being services for our students who are really struggling and are needing help. And so this is a huge transformational process for us in terms of what our police department's been doing, and the efforts that we've been putting in place to adopt new approaches and procedures have been transformational, and we measure these outcomes about what our students are feeling about this, and we're getting a really strong sense that this approach around partnering, around community engagement has been working, and it's a continued work in progress for us, but it's something that we put in place on purpose because we know that this is such an important part of what we do as an institution, is to support our community.
Thanks. So we have about 10 minutes left. So I thought we would talk a little bit about the refresh process. We could talk about the mechanics of that, and then maybe one or two more questions before we're done. But as you kind of lead us into a year-long strategic plan refresh process, what are you hoping for?
Yeah. So I'm going to punt this question back to you in a second, but here's what I hope for. I would like, we're a community of about 40,000 individuals, right? We have 35,000 students and almost 5,000 faculty and staff. And I would like for everyone to have an opportunity to share their thoughts about this process, to share their hopes, their ideas. We're going to have a big idea gathering component to the webpage, right? And so, but what I'm really wanting is that the steering committee for the strategic plan refresh, which is really the University Leadership Council, plus our shared governance representatives, plus a bunch of other individuals that are really important to our enterprise. That entire body is going to be having conversations, much like we did around campus climate, with each of the component divisions of the institution. So each of the colleges and each of the components of the major divisions, all divisions of the institution. And there are about 39 people on the steering committee, representing something like 32 different components of the institution, which is the entire institution. And what I'm really hoping for is the narrative that we've shared today, the webpage, the PowerPoint presentation that's going to be made available, that's kind of the background information for all of this. All of this is going to be put in the hands of the steering committee, which is essentially the University Leadership Council under the aegis of Provost Espy, and it will involve significant conversations across the institution about here's where we're at, here's where we're going, what are your ideas, help us synthesize these ideas, and eventually this process, which is iterative in nature, will come back and in terms of information collection and allow the steering committee to synthesize it and refine it and bring a recommendation back to me about where to take the refresh for the strategic plan. So if it's done correctly, and we intend for it to be that way, we'd like everybody to have a chance to learn, understand their role in this process. So if I'm a college dean, I want to make sure every one of my employees and my student governance group in my college, all of my faculty, all understand what my college is doing to drive where the enterprise is going. And if I'm in development and alumni relations, that division, I want every employee in that division to understand their role relative to initiatives, KPIs, progress indicators, the purpose of the institution, the celebration of the institution, the capital campaign for the institution. We want everybody in that division to have a clear sense of what their role is in supporting the entire enterprise. And if we do that across the enterprise, I would love to be able to say that all 40,000 understand our destinations, why we have them, how we're going to get there, and feel a sense of pride and ownership and celebration about our progress in going where we're going. That's what I hope for.
So I think you were going to ask me just talk a little bit about a little bit about the process.
Can you help folks navigate what the next year looks like?
Sure. So I would say that the two words you can sort of think about as beacons is it will be interactive and it will be iterative. So we're going to have a lot of conversations, and it's going to take us some time to kind of refine it, really understand it, and make sure we're hearing the community correctly. So one of the things you can look for really between now and the end of the calendar year is that we've asked all the members of the steering committee to set up an initial conversation with the stakeholders in their units. So this could be faculty, staff, students, other external groups, where they can just begin to kind of tell some of the story that we started telling today. Let's sort of remind us where we started, and let's really kind of make sense and figure out what's made us so successful so far. And when we come back after the new year, we're going to have really in-depth kind of listening conversations. And during those conversations, we want to hear all those things. We want to hear your thoughts about destinations, mission, vision, values. Give us some thoughts about where you think UTSA should go, right? What's working, what might be different. All of this information kind of comes back and gets synthesized, analyzed, kind of grouped into themes. And then the steering committee will begin to kind of put it into place, and they'll start to think about where do they want to turn up the volume, where do they want to make some changes, where are things working really well. And the idea is that the steering committee will come back to the UTSA community and say, did we get it right? We want to know, are we on the right track? And the goal is that really kind of over the second half of the semester into the summer, that the steering committee can really kind of bring it back to the community, and ultimately, President Eighmy, bring it to you as a series of recommendations for you to bring forward to the plan. I would say there's lots of different ways to get involved. There's some people like coming to meetings and being part of small group discussions. There's also going to be opportunities just to share your feedback through surveys and the web portal. So there's many different ways. We want to find you where you are and listen to what you have to say.
And right now, we're expecting to present the refresh in the November timeframe for next year to the board and to, obviously, to system. And the webpage will have all of the resource documents that we've been assembling around other strategic plan refreshes or new strategic plans that other institutions within the system have done, and some related to the business pro forma that I described earlier. But there are 20 or 30 documents that are going to go in the resource area that are kind of foundational to some of the assumptions we're making about the national driving forces that are out there, state driving forces that are out there. So there's a lot of homework to do, if you want, about understanding what students are saying in surveys, what employers are saying in surveys, what's up with this new measurement of universities around economic mobility, social mobility, what's up with the Texas economy, what's up with these concerns around issues related to culture wars on campus, related to the whole issue of, is a four-year degree worth it? So there's a lot of good background information there that you can look at and learn from if you're interested.
Great, so I'll ask you one last question. This is a question that came in from the QR code. Let's end on a high note. How do we expand and leverage our successful athletics program to help the university grow and reach its strategic initiatives?
Oh my, yeah. I never thought I would spend as much time on athletics as I do as your president. I will say this, everywhere I go in our community, people talk to me about our athletics program all the time. They are so prideful of and delighted for UTSA about where we're at right now, whether it's at HEB, CVS, walking downtown. Everybody comes up to me and is just very excited about this. I mean, they're happy about Carnegie R1, they're happy about student success, they're happy that their son or daughter or brother or sister is a happy Roadrunner going to UTSA, but Red McCombs said it very correctly back when I first got here. Athletics is currently a front porch to the university, and so I delight in our successes and the interest that it has provided our community about their desire for us and where we're going. I mean, in all honesty, separate from football, but inclusive of football, the community has great pride in everything that we do. I've never lived in a town with a town-gown relationship where there's such love for the institution. It's a remarkable, remarkable thing, and it's a very powerful thing. It will serve us well as we go forward. So I'm delighted that they are delighted with us, our community. So.
Well, thank you, President Eimy. So we're just about out of time, but you want to offer some closing words?
Yeah, I just want to say thank you for being here and thank you for attending virtually. There are going to be many, many conversations across UTSA starting this week and going forward into the new year and into the spring semester. And you have a chance to participate, to share your ideas. And I'm just really lucky to be here with you and to celebrate how far we've come and where we're going. And I feel very optimistic about the future. And it's because of all of you that we have so much progress to be delighted about. And it's all of you that care about this place and who we are and what we do. And it's all of you that really impact our students and affect their trajectories. And it's all of you that care greatly about how to get to where we want to go. And so we have a great team here. We have wonderful colleagues, and we have a wonderful purpose for our institution and what we do in our community here, and how we're changing the future. So it's a good place to be, and this is a good moment, even though I shared very sad news at the beginning of this hour. Barry would want us to be doing exactly all of these things as we go forward, and including winning football games. And so we're a lucky crew to have all of you, and I'm grateful that you're here, so thank you.
Okay, thank you for coming.